container platform, which we evangelize here to our customers in banks, in FSI, in public sectors, in all the sectors. And another area where the open source projects which is leading is in automation. So Ansible is one of the tool which is currently in market, in demand, and many people are really wanted to know and learn and utilize in their day-to-day jobs. We all know that Microsoft was a proprietary, and when we learn as Microsoft with Windows and with Microsoft servers, and it is a proprietary company. And even Microsoft in the year 2001, one of the former Microsoft CEO, Steve Ballmer, he made a famous statement. He said, he branded Linux a cancer that attaches itself in an intellectual property sense to everything it touches. But Microsoft openly announced we were wrong about open source. And Microsoft has embraced open source and even Linux in recent years. You can see the article I have pasted in the slides, and there's a reference to the articles. And there are a lot of many stages where Microsoft, in one of the stage, Microsoft President Brad Smith, he believes that the company was wrong about open source, and he made the statement that Microsoft was on the wrong side of history when open source exploded at the beginning of the century. And I can say that about me personally. So this was the exact statement which Brad Smith was made to recent MIT event. And Smith has been at Microsoft for more than 25 years, and he was one of the company's senior lawyers during its battle with open source software. And with that, Microsoft is even shipping a full Linux kernel in the Windows 10 update. Do you believe that because Microsoft Windows and Linux were rivals, they were competing each other, but Microsoft is even decided to ship a full Linux kernel with Windows 10 update. And Microsoft is now one of the top contributors for open source. So about 4,550 employees that contributing to open source. And they have become a software giant, the single largest contributor to open source projects in the world, beating Facebook, Docker, Google, Apache, and many others. Who are other open source contributors? If you look at the top GitHub contributors, number 1 is Microsoft, number 2 is Google, and number 3 is Red Hat. Red Hat is top 3rd in the ranking of GitHub contributors, with the total number of employees actively contributing to open source projects on GitHub, according to 2017 and 2018 report of GitHub. And there are a lot of other companies that they are actively contributing to open source. And that explains and that triggers the curiousness why the big companies are moving towards open source. What is open anyway? So let's start at the beginning in the context of software industry, right? What does open mean? I wanted to give an example here because I just don't want to talk technologies and terms here. I wanted to take it and relate to the common ideology that we have and to explain you what is open source is. So we all know cookies. So let's get started with cookies as an example. Let's say you are exceptionally good at making cookies, and you are so good, in fact, that people tell you that you have to sell the cookies what you make. It is so good. You essentially have 2 options for doing this. Option 1, you can bake cookies, pack them up, brand them, and sell them. People will pay for them and consume them, and when they want more cookies, they'll come to you for more. So that's how the first model of selling works, right? And you keep the cookie recipe to yourself. However, you cannot improve your cookies. You know what you have, you know what you know, and you sell what you have baked. The second option is you can bake cookies, package them up, and before shipping them out, paste on top of the box the entire cookie recipe, step-by-step instructions for reproducing the recipe, and notes on best baking practices for these particular cookies. Yes, if you choose the second option, you have enabled anyone to make your cookies themselves and possibly sell them to others. But some people will continue to buy their cookies from you, whether that's due to convenience or because they like the in-store customer experience chatting to you. But consider what else you have done. You have empowered your customers to build on and improve what you have done, baking modifications versions of your recipes. You have extended an invitations to collaborate, to catalyze communities of bakers who love your recipe and get together to share modifications of bespoke versions. You have opened the door to new innovations that might even come from outside your bake shop. As people tinker with new taste trends and directions, you have widened the pool of talented bakers. You have made the cookies more secure because anyone can see what is in them because you are publishing the recipe right on top of the package and be alerted to harmful components like allergens. Some may be allergen to gluten, etc. So the second way is the open source way. I have another ideology where you have the water everywhere and you have river water where everyone can consume water, everyone can contribute to water, the rain can contribute. There are different methods to contribute to the water. And anyone wants to consume the water, they can consume from the river water. But what the business model is, there is somebody who's take the river water and they package it, and then they filter, they distill it and purify it, and then they package, brand, and then they give it to people for the safe consumptions. So this is second ideology, but I'll prefer the cookie ideology. Now let's see how that applies to computer software. Software has its own recipes, what programmers call source code. Source code is the stuff that programmers work with, but regular users never use. Just like few people who eat cookies rarely work with raw ingredients that go into them. Source code explains what a program does, how it does, what it does, and why it does. So that is, programmers can add their own notes. When you have access to source code, you can see exactly how the software works. You can modify it, you can share it, you can build on it, and you can adapt it for your own needs. For example, I build a HTML page and I open source my code. So today I have my HTML page with the background color, with the picture, with the marquee, and all those things. And when I open source my code, there is someone who wants to build a similar page, but for his requirement, he might want to add some more tabs, some more columns, some more pages. He just modify on top of the same page. So that's how the open source, the development methodology made possible by a specific licensing decision. Someone decides to explicitly make code available to others under the terms of a license that grants express permissions to view, modify, and enhance that code. And that means users always have the right to use the code for any purpose they like. It also means that people can view the source code for the software, not just execute it manually. That decision is also an invitation to join in a collaborative endeavor. It also an acknowledgement one person, team, or organization may not be able to produce the best or most viable solution, but by inviting others to participate, like how the other person who come and participate in collaborating the HTML codes with you. And once he improvises, you can use that same code for you. So to us, open source also indicates a community-driven effort. People who modify code should also, in turn, be able to share it so that others can build and improve it. This is how collaborative communities form around important software projects. But there are common incorrect assumptions. People might think the licensor is obligated to provide guarantees, support, and updates. Open source means an application is available to download at no cost. No, open source is not doesn't mean it is a free source. Doesn't mean it is free. Open source software is always cost free. No. Having the source code means the software is open source. No. Open source is the same as freeware, shareware, or public domain software. You can use open source software however you like. No. These are some of the common incorrect assumptions. But that's not the case. When people and organizations release code, they are inviting others to collaborate with them. And in many ways, they get to set some of the terms of that collaboration. They get to structure how that collaboration occurs and what happens to the products of that collaboration. And they do that through licenses, which we will discuss next. Let's return to our fledgling cookie business, right? When you decide to release the recipe along with the finished cookie themselves, you might attach some rules or provisions to the box as well. So I told before that give the before you package and sell, you put all your recipes on top of the package. What you're doing is you're also attaching some rules or some provisions to the box as well. You might express that others are free to use, modify, and share the recipe as long as they agree to these conditions, agree to these common agreements, agree to bake the cookies in compliance with your local, state health and safety guidelines. Share your modifications with the community of bakers maintaining the recipe if you decide to sell your recipe. Agree that you will not hold the baking community or the recipe maintainers accountable for consequence of cookie consumptions. By choosing to open up the recipe, you don't necessarily relinquish all of your ability to influence how people might use it. You establish some provisions to ensure that recipe remains safe and open as it leaves your hands and begins undergoing modifications and innovations. Let's get a bit more technical. This applies to software too. Those aspects of open source development we discussed earlier, they are laid out more formally in the free software definition, which the Free Software Foundation maintains. That definition grants the following freedoms: the freedom to run the program as you wish for any purpose, the freedom to study how the program works and change it so it does your computing as you wish, freedom. Access to the source code is a precondition for this. Freedom to redistribute copies so you can help others, and freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions to others. By doing this, you can give the whole community a chance to benefit from your changes. Access to the source code is a precondition for this as well. Structuring collaboration is a significant step in organizing how innovation occurs around the software you open source. And it's an essential consideration, especially for organizations whose livelihood depends on an open source software. Choosing to participate in open source ecosystems may have implications for how an organization operates or how it generates values and serves customers. For example, so next, we should examine ways that building a business on an open source development model might be possible. Let's clarify something important right away. Open source is not a business model. Unfortunately, some people tend to think it is, that by opening up something that they are going to automatically generate new revenue streams or something like that. Those is not really a business model. It's open source, then immediately they think that will be a profit for it. Open source is a development methodology. It requires you to build a business model that operates according to open source principles and adjacent to open source community development activities. It isn't a business model, but it may require an enterprise to think differently about its business model. Let's return to the example, cookie baking. If you remain committed to our intention of giving away the recipe alongside the cookie itself, we will need to think about ways we can build a business in light of that decision. We might imagine how several different enterprises emerge in the market, all using the same recipe, but all focused on generating new forms of value around that shared recipe. For example, the ready-to-eat model. Customers just want to have the best cookies ready for them whenever they want. So you become an expert in pre-packaging and having those cookies available to eat on demand. The build your own model, customers like building and baking their own cookies, but prefer a streamlined process. So you ship raw ingredients in pre-measured portions. I think there are a few companies in US who does that. So customers can craft their own. The tasting experience model, like you create the ultimate cookie tasting experience, inviting customers to a multi-hour immersive culinary experience that exposes them to professionally prepared varieties. As you refine the recipe and make discoveries, you submit your changes back to the community that maintains the recipe. You don't own or even entirely control that recipe, but you can influence how it gets developed and how others prefer to make and eat it. You might realize several benefits of doing this. For example, maybe someone alters the ingredients in such a way that the taste improves and number of calories in a cookie drops. For software, this is like a change that leads speed and performance improvements. Somebody do something and it impacts your performance. Maybe bakers around the world are making cookies in different altitudes and collect their notes on the best ways to make the cookies at different elevations. It's a different shape. For software, it's like pooling documentation to systems. Maybe someone wants to add yellow food dye to produce bright yellow colored cookies, and majority of people don't want this, and the idea is rejected by the community. So, however, that person is still free to make them for themselves. He can have his own cookie with the yellow dye or yellow colored cookies. But it doesn't come into the community as a primary recipe. So these are some of the things, how the business models, they can take it forward. And if you look at the benefits, it attract and retain the better talents. To remain competitive and to satisfy their own curiosity, developers are increasingly choosing employers that allow them to work with the latest technologies. So these latest technologies are now all open source. Think Kubernetes, Linux, JavaScript, frameworks. By actively participating in open source communities, your company is demonstrating it is the kind of a place where those talented developers want to work. You are literally meeting them where they are online. So it doesn't mean that you want to complete your education and then you wanted to join a company and become successful. You can straight away, you can start collaborating, you can start contributing to the communities. And when you start contributing to those popular projects, the companies are, you are visible to the companies. And companies can able to see you. You're in real time. You're no longer just talking, right? You're proving something that you are contributing in these technologies and you are the master of, and you're developing something new. You are adding new codes, new features. And it is easy for you to be visible for the companies to recruit you and influence directions of technological department, right? Like if anyone can participate in open source communities, including joining community meetings. So these are some of the places where we can influence people. So increase the code quality, like because more people can see, they can validate, they can discuss, and ultimately, if you wanted to develop a project, but you don't know what, how to improve your projects, how to who to reach out for your projects for the code quality and all those things, the community is the best place where you can collaborate. There are a lot of people around the world. Your company is just not limited within one or two people in your room, right? It is all over the world. They can able to see your projects, they can able to contribute to your projects, and they can able to improve. And so these are some of the benefits of open source. So by now you may be asking how you can participate in the open source ecosystem. So I'll come to that later. So some of the benefits of participating in open source is like you can create a better software faster. You can tap diversity of perspectives on the development, and you can become aware of changes to the project roadmaps and keep pace with the competitors and increase code quality. There are a lot of benefits for you when you're participating in the open source. Especially, I've taken this topic of open source and digital transformation because as a students, as a faculty members, you are the core members who are actively learning, actively developing, and innovating new things. And when you cultivate these open source methodology and models in your development, you really go to the heights. What is digital transformations? So digital transformation is fundamentally changing how you operate and deliver value to the customers. There are legacy customers where they are traditional, they still go by the books, and they are not transformed digitally. So this COVID-19 situation proves that they have to digitally transform. And some of the companies sad to say they are really falling who are not really digitally transformed. And companies where they can have their employees work from home, they have those virtual desktop, and for colleges like home-based learning systems, they are coping up with this COVID-19 situation, and which is good. where where I would say that COVID-19 is one of the key influencing in organizations, which is making which is accelerating the digital transformation faster. And when there's one of the statistics from the Global IT Trends and Priority Research in August 2019. So they asked whether the digital transformation, nearly half of companies are in full transformation stage. And where is your company in the journey of the digital transformations? Like 46% they're already transforming, 24% they are leading in the digital transformations, and 21% are emerging, and 2% don't have any plans for that. And those 2% are suffering now. And we all talk about digital transformations, but why organizations struggle to move into digital transformations? So if you look at the statistics, which again from the Global IT Trends and Priorities Research, the top blockers of the digital transformation is IT talent or skill gap. Because you have to reskill, the organization has to reskill what the employees already have. And they have to get new skilled employees in, and they have to cope up with the new technologies for the digital transformation. And this is one of the area where, as a student, you can able to fill the gaps. In Singapore, what we do, so we work with governments. We call it as graduate programs, and where immediately after the graduation, the students join us. Not only our company, they join there are different companies who part of this program, and government has the scope kind of a system, stipend systems. So they learn, they certify, and then we gave them 1 year period for them to learn all these new technologies. So students are easy to adopt these new technologies because they don't have anything to unlearn and learn. They can learn new technologies faster. So this is the area which I would really say that the market needs fresh blood. The market needs new skills, because there is really a IT talent or skill gaps for them as a blocker of digital transformation. And if I look at another report, this is from computerweekly.com, where they have did a survey in which areas the companies are investing, or they budgeting, or they increasing the budget in the year 2020. And according to the survey, if you look at, of course, AI, machine learning, cloud services, security and risk management, and all those areas where they are increasing the budget. But you will be interesting to see that one of the area where they are investing in budget or the increasing budget is staff, skills development. So this really proves that the gap that they have and the budget investment where the organizations are doing, it tallies. That means there's really a skill gap. And as a students, you really wanted to have those technologies, learn those technologies, and you have a lot of opportunities when you graduate. And the previous report was from the APEC, and I just wanted to zoom down. What is the IT priorities of 2020 in India? And to me, when I compared, it is almost similar priorities between APEC and India. And India is also want to invest in staff and skills development. And in terms of contributions to open source, GitHub eyes India market. So GitHub is one of the open source contribution where we contribute all the codes and all those things, right? And India has a third highest number of active developers on GitHub, growing by 22% over the past year. And the number of public repositories in India has also grown by 75%. So India is also moving towards the right direction. And you take Swiggy. Swiggy is one of the, you people know better than me. Swiggy is one of the food delivery startups, and India's largest food delivery platform. The company is using GitHub to run its software development operations and resulted in increased productivity and faster innovation. So this was according to one of the director of the engineering from the company. And if you look at the businesses, even those in traditional sectors such as manufacturing, mining, and agriculture are beginning to recognize that technology plays a critical role in reaching new frontiers. So it doesn't need to you don't need to be in a software company for you to adapt these things. The companies, irrespective of whichever companies, you are in electronics company, you are in manufacturing company, or you are an agriculture company, technology is critical core now. And what this means for you, wherever you are in your digital journey, right, based on where your priorities or investment and challenges are different, because not all the organizations will have the same priorities. There are organizations who might be having priorities that they wanted to straight away start with the digital transformation. Some of the organizations, they still have a lot of legacies and they wanted to migrate those legacies. They cannot just on overnight, they cannot just revamp and throw the legacies and bring the digitalized infra, right? So they have to take step by step. So it's like adopt new technology, accelerate transformation to become the leader, and continuously innovate to stay as the leader. This is very important. So there's a shift in the innovation. So we don't say that company has stopped spending or company is spending on these mainly, or company is spending on that. Company is still spending, but there's a shift in this innovation and spending. So those companies who are having legacies, they are focusing on IT optimization. They have to optimize their existing legacy systems first and applications first. And after that, they are moving towards the hybrid cloud infrastructures. So hybrid cloud infrastructure is really getting popular these days with booming cloud companies. There are a lot of cloud companies like Amazon, AWS, Google, Microsoft, IBM Cloud, and Alibaba Cloud. A lot of cloud companies are bringing it. So how the organization make the decision on which cloud they are going to host their applications, and how they are going to make sure that they are the transformation of the application from one place, from on-premises to cloud, is seamless, is secure, and most importantly, they are not getting locked in, because they do not want to be like paying the ransomware of cloud companies charging them sky high. So hybrid cloud infrastructure is one of the things where they can able to still manage, irrespective of their own data centers or public cloud data centers or private cloud data centers. They manage them like just like a single data center, and it's a scalable capacity for them. And cloud native developments, where the applications were really developed. Nowadays, if you see that applications are transformed from monolithic to microservices. So the cloud native development plays a major role here. So there are platforms like OpenShift container platforms, like Kubernetes orchestrators. They are helping for those cloud native applications. So in order for the organizations to transform into a real agile infrastructure. So the agile integration is one of the major things where they no longer follow those waterfall sequence. So they wanted to release, for example, if a bank has a a bank opens a digital banking, and if they wanted to add a feature, so in the past what they do, they used to run it as a 6-month project for them to develop the feature, test the feature, and then release that particular feature to the public. Nowadays, it's not like that. It's like just like a sprint. It's a 2-week sprint. They develop and then they release immediately, and they have a shorter goal, and they achieve a shorter goal, and they immediately see the return of investments. And automation. So wherever possible, in order to be efficient and in order to meet the speed to market, they need to automate everything. So they no longer are spending times in manual efforts. So they are investing in automation tools, investing in business process automation in order to reduce cost and complexities, and also the errors deployed, like to avoid the human errors. When you automate, it is standardized, and it avoids the human errors as well. So how the organizations can get there? So they can get there in multiple ways. So I would say that the most important thing is the architecture, culture, and process, which are critical for a digital leadership. So if organizations want to become a digital leader, they have to adopt open architecture, culture, and open process, and transform more than just technology. They shouldn't just do a technology change. They have to change. The change has to come from the organization in terms of people, process, and culture, right? So of course, the open architecture is a new way of developing and delivering and integrating the systems and applications based on open source. So they no longer they are not tied up by the proprietary companies in terms of the innovation and development, and they have the roadmap open to them. They have the open source softwares where they access to a lot of different open source softwares where they can innovatively think, and then they can achieve their goal. And the open process is one of the new ways of doing things across both IT and business. So last time we used to see that IT team is IT and business team is business. They don't mingle each other. So now it is completely different. So if you come to the market, if you come to the industries, you would see the paradigm shift in those process and culture, where take example of DevOps, the developer and operations now is combined together, and they are forming a new team and new culture, and they are modernized the infrastructures and taking advantage of cloud resources so that they can move more quickly. They don't need to wait for a IT team to procure a hardware in the data center in order for them to deploy a new or test a new applications. They're just scaling like anything. An open culture is a new way of working together and building organizations. So in Red Hat, we follow open culture. And if you have chance to read one of the book from our former Red Hat CEO, Jim Whitehurst, it's called Open Organizations. It's a very good book which tells you clearly what open culture is. We no longer, I mean, it is not that you are a developer, you cannot give ideas to the engineering teams, and it's like innovation is possible. So anyone can throw ideas to anyone, and if the idea is really well, they take it and then they really make it a reality. And open architecture is really required for the next, and it is seriously considered as a next generation architecture. So they are moving from traditional infrastructure. So if you know, in the past, people used to spend a lot of times in deploying operating systems on a bare metal, and later it moved into completely virtualized. In Singapore, there are a lot of, not only in Singapore, in this region, Asia Pacific, there are a lot of organizations, they cannot deploy a single applications on a bare metal. They have to take MD level of approval if they wanted to deploy a single applications on a bare metal, because in order to optimize their resources, they have virtualized completely, and they do not want to rely on one single big iron, right? And they are moving towards the hybrid and multi-cloud concepts. Like I mentioned, that they are looking for applications to manage seamless across the boundary wherever they are, and they are not really looking at getting locked in or tied up with one single infrastructure. And cloud native platforms. So there are a lot of technologies and next generation softwares which is enable like integrations, automations like Ansible, and orchestration like Kubernetes, and operating systems and containers like Linux. And if you won't believe that one of the Microsoft president told in one of our forum, more than 50% of workload running in Microsoft Azure cloud is Linux. And I believe it is even more than that. And everyone is standardizing based on Linux because it gives you the power of innovation. And open process, the process must keep pace with the modern technology, because if you change the technology and if you change the softwares and all those things to meet your innovation, but if you don't change your process, you will definitely fail. So process must keep pace with the modern technology, and with the sheer volume of complex systems, and agile process are continuous, iterative, and automated and fast. So organizations are taking DevOps approach, and they are significantly seeing benefits. There are big benefits to culture change, the agility that they can have is how fast you can do new things or pivot when disruption is imminent. Your life cycle is shorter, teams are smaller, and most important to many organizations, the cost and risk can be lower. Culture is critical and it is really beneficial. And look at the process across the organizations. Like you start by looking at the process you currently have in place. What could be improved? What does your development process look like? And do you have more than one depending on where you are in the organizations? What about your business process? Are those ad hoc or standard, or is how about automations? How much of your technology includes automation and how much is still manual? And what about your security process and protocols look like? Don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Not knowing is an opportunity, right? So open process enables you to those. And modern application development process like Agile, Scrum, and DevOps and CI/CD, which is really nowadays is a key to the open organizations, right? Like open your culture where it's transparent, collaboration, and consistency are required, right? And just automate as much as possible, eliminate those manual tasks, which you can eliminate those repeated tasks, and you can focus your team's effort in focusing on something new innovations for your business. And same goes with the education sector as well. And get the right platform, choose packaging and platforms to provide the isolations and automations. So for the modern business process, it has to be consistency and collaboration and better decisions. So it must have improved orchestrations, it must have increased automation and enable the line of business where the user participate in the app development directly. It is not that users only use the applications. Users must be part of the application development as well. And there must be deeper analysis, collect and analyze the data, and so you can present business metrics and recommended actions. There is one area which I personally noticing that which will boom in upcoming days, which is data scientist, data science, data engineering. With the large number of data across the world and data is booming, the data analytics is very important. And you might have seen the news that the data is really changing the whole world. In fact, it is also changing the US presidency electionship as well, right? So in Singapore, I noticed this in universities where they are, the students are really taking these kind of courses, and it's part of the curriculum, like data scientist, data science, data engineering, data modeling, and those things are really getting bigger and bigger in terms of, and it is used in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And if you might have seen in my earlier slides, AI and ML is one of the top priority of the organizations as well. So open organizations create sustained competitive advantage. New delivery models and revenue streams, faster time to market, new systems of innovations, all those things. So the organization must go hand in hand with culture and open technology, right? So the culture is like you have to be collaborative. You have to collaborate with your teammates, collaborate with communities, and you have to be transparent. And you also need to inclusivity and community contributions and all those things. This is how organizations can able to achieve a faster time to market. I don't need to wait for myself to think something before I innovate a new thing. Whereas I just come up with an idea and I crowdsource. There are different minds put in work, and I develop my model within shorter time frame, so that I can able to fastly go into the market. And to understand how to get started in open source, you will first need to understand how this kind of massively collaborative or globally distributed development tends to work. So we call this upstream and downstream. So this is how the Red Hat business model as well, right? Open source practitioners tend to use the language of tributaries to describe how open source software ecosystem work. So developers like you, people, students can be a developer as well. You are for your as part of the curriculum, you are developing codes and all those things, and you can improvise your codes. And you often describe whatever that you develop, you will first put it in the upstream, which I would say is like GitHub or GitLab repositories. And so once it goes to the upstream, you can choose which project that you wanted to work, or you wanted to create a new project, you can start working on the new projects. And if your new project is really thought-provoking and people see that this project has a lot of value, and a lot of people can start to contribute to your project, that is really a requirement in the current market. And once the project is developed, and this means that there are people who can validate, and they can able to push it to the downstream as a product, right? So I just written one more time to our open cookie business. So as we saw in the previous example, like numerous entities like individual bakers or bakers shops, etc., are all making use of this superior cookie recipe, right? Now you have a superior cookie recipe and you put it in the upstream to power their baking endeavors, personal or professional. The recipe exists in upstream from those entities, or in other words, the entities are generating value and creating innovation downstream from the primary people. So, but as we also already noted, they are sharing their innovation back upstream, because this is one of our rules and agreement that we defined earlier, right? So whatever goes downstream, so once they package it and all this, it goes back to the upstream, so that the others who use the recipe can benefit from what they are doing and their entire ecosystem, not just a single party can grow and mature. So now let's apply the same analogy to the software. So here is an example from Red Hat open source ecosystem. So Upstream is an entire ecosystem of open source projects, all buzzing with activity. All those projects solve problems related, in this case, to computers' operating systems. So I'm just giving an example with the operating systems for a simple understanding, right? So we have a lot of projects in open source which I'll share in the next slides. You might recognize one of those technologies, Linux, the operating system kernel. It's a rather famous open source project. But Linux and any of the individual components don't really operate in isolation. They rely on one another. They need to be combined into a working as a whole. An open source community project, Fedora, which Red Hat sponsors, brings all those components together into a coherent platform. So if you look at the upstream, if kernel is one of the open source project, it cannot be become a product itself. It has to be combined with the security tools. It has to combine with the desktop. It has to combine with the display server. It has to combine with the software package manager. So who will do all those things, right? So the open source community project, they combine those small projects and then they make it as a product. So Fedora is now an open source operating system, which is a Linux, which is upstream Linux. So now I'm having this open source Linux where I can add my own features, I can add my own security functions and all those things. And anyone in open source can able to take and consume it. But however, we cannot control whether the codes who was uploaded into the upstream is a good code or bad code. And that's how we at Red Hat, the innovation that occur in Fedora have a chance of flowing downstream to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So one of Red Hat's flagship products. So what's upstream for one project might actually be a downstream to others. For example, Fedora is upstream from RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but it's downstream from so many other open source projects. This is how open innovation tends to work. Innovation occurring rapidly upstream flows downstream to various projects and even to products like those from Red Hat. And we ensure that product Red Hat Enterprise Linux is really an enterprise grade. It is really required for enterprise organizations. And we do the testing, we harden the image, and we make the package which is ready to consume by the industry. Of course, we don't charge for the software license, but we charge for the support, that if there is any problem or any security issues, any bug fixing, that we help the customers to fix it. And then, of course, the groups are regularly proposing the fixes, updates, patches, and features back upstream. So whatever the bug fix that we fix it in Red Hat Enterprise Linux, as an open source DNA, we contribute back to the upstream. So that's how the development model works. Excuse. The open source way. So there are millions of projects in the community. So as an open source way, that the collaboration where you're sharing the problems, you're solving it faster, and then again sending back to the upstream and working together in creating the standards, and there is a transparency for both access and the ability to act and all those things. So these are a lot of collaborations in the open source layer, right? So this really helps a product to get even better, rather than what you have and you code it and you use it. There is millions of minds working on your projects to make it better. So from the community to enterprise, if you look at these are the open source projects where Red Hat is working, and these are the open source projects where Red Hat is working in the community, and we productize from those open source projects and we give it to customers. Like Red Hat Enterprise Linux, virtualization is like a virtualization platform. OpenStack platform is the private cloud. Red Hat storage is a software-defined storage. Red Hat middleware, which is JBoss community, which is Fuse and a lot of middleware. Red Hat OpenShift, which is the OKD, is a popular product, and which is a key in hybrid and multi-cloud and container platforms in cloud-native developments. And I would really suggest, if you have chance or if you have the interest, please take a look at the container platform OpenShift and Kubernetes especially. And Ansible automation platforms are another area where I have seen a lot of colleges, they are using Ansible automation. It's a simple YAML code, right, which is human readable, and it is very simple to automate all the day-to-day tasks that you are doing in Unix and Windows and things. So these form the foundation for the hybrid cloud, and in one of the Gartner research where they were saying that landscape of cloud adoption is one of the hybrid clouds and multi-clouds. By 2020, 75% of organizations will have deployed a multi-cloud or hybrid cloud model, and that is really happening now. And we are increasingly seeing a lot of organizations moving towards these multi-cloud technologies, moving towards cloud platforms and container platforms. And as I said, you need to have a common platform, common layer across multiple, irrespective of the infrastructures, where Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is the operating system, which provides the common layer across the platforms. And on top of it, the OpenShift container platform, which really provides a common container platform across the clouds. So irrespective of whether you're running in AWS cloud or IBM cloud or on-premises private cloud or virtualization, you don't need to worry about getting locked in, because the workload that you're going to run on top of it, which is looking at the Red Hat Enterprise Linux as an operating system across the environments, and OpenShift container platform as a single container platform across environments. And look towards the future. There are a lot more things which is happening now. So I'm also part of. I'm working with some of the telcos in Singapore as well, and also I do interact with some of my colleagues in India, where they're working with telcos in India like Bharti Airtel. The 5G is getting to the market soon. It is going to hit the market soon, and 5G is really going to be a game changer, where you'll see a lot of innovation, a lot of technologies, and the way the organization works and the way the technology goes is going to be different after the 5G hits the market. And the serverless technology, I mean, these are big terms, but I wanted, as a students, I wanted you to expose to these terms, because once you see these terms, you will have the tendency to go and look or read what it is, and how we can able to understand these technologies, and what is the underlying components, because these are big high level terms, and what are the real underlying components, um, which is which is helping to make the future, right? So for electronic students, or the Internet of Things, the integrations with the sensors and all those things, this is getting more and more into reality, and we have seen a lot of hospitals are using AI. So even in the COVID-19 situations, I have read that some of the hospitals are using artificial intelligence to identify pneumonia from the X-ray report, so which helps them to shorter the diagnosis period. So, being a student or being an active learner, I wanted you to contribute back to the ecosystems. So there are some ways to contribute back to the ecosystems, where you can, whatever you do, you can work in the upstreams, in the GitHub, in the projects. So you can contribute back in terms of by asking questions, by solving the problems, or by developing projects, or by finding a bugs or sending documentations and all those things is a ways for you to contribute or contribute the codes. There are different, I mean, just take a look at opensource.org, opensource.com. Take part in the community events. There are a lot of practices, community practices for open source. Red Hat is one of the major and leader in the open source evangelization, and we do conduct a lot of open source program. So get involved in these open source projects like Fedora, which is Linux, and Kubernetes. All these are open source projects which you can get involved. And finally, I would want you to give some free training and training opportunities or training platforms for you to learn during the stay-home period. So we do offer some of the free trainings on OpenShift applications. So you can take a look at this URL. And there are some of the labs where you don't need to build your own lab, but you can able to just access by the URL. We have provisioned the labs for learning for students and for everyone to understand the concepts and to go through those learning scenarios. And as an institution, so you can, the Red Hat Academy, which bridges the gap between the education and the industries. So help you in the industry training, certifications, and all those things. And for the students, for them to have the access to those resources, education, certifications. Yeah, so right on time, I believe. So I hope you have understood something from this session. I can open to questions if there is any questions that you wanted to clarify. If we have the, if still the time permits, and if you still wanted to.
Any questions from participants side? You can unmute your mic and ask the question to sir.
No questions?
Any questions from participants side? I hope so. No questions.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
So if there's no questions, either they completely understand, or they are they're trying to digest whatever I have said for the past 5 minutes. Good.
Yes, sir.
If there's any questions, you can still email me or you can connect me via LinkedIn. So I have posted my email ID on the slides. So please take note and just feel free to approach. Thank you very much. Thanks for this opportunity.
Good afternoon, Ananda. On behalf of RIT management, ma'am, and on behalf of RIT management, chairman, principal, head of the department, and faculty members of ECE, I deem it a great honor to propose the vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to propose hearty vote of thanks to our respected and most distinguished chief guest and speaker Dr. Chidambaram Muthupalniappan, sir, Senior Solution Architect, Singapore, for gracing today's webinar and making excellent presentation and making this webinar interesting and meaningful. Thank you, sir, for your very interesting and thought-provoking lecture.
Thank you very much.
I would Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our principal, HOD ma'am, for giving this opportunity to making this webinar a grand success. Finally, a wonderful participants who have turned up in such a great number, not only from Tamil Nadu, but also from other states. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Once again, I thank you all your cordial cooperation. Thank you. Dear participants, the feedback link is given in the chat box. We expect your valuable feedback for this webinar. After submitting your feedback, you will receive your certificates on your given mail IDs. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you very much, sir, for your valuable time with us, sir. Very
No worries, ma'am. You're
informative
welcome.
session.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for giving this
Okay.
opportunity. Yeah. Hope
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
benefit of this. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Dear participants, the feedback link is given in the chat box. Please fill the feedback link. Please fill the feedback